Welcome back to another episode of the History of Professional Wrestling. I am your host, Joe Monroe, and today we're taking a trip deep into the Appalachian Mountains, a place where wrestling wasn't just a show. It was part of the culture, part of the identity, part of the Saturdays, weekdays, and the communities that help fill small town arenas. Today, we're going to be talking about none other than Smoky Mountain Wrestling, a promotion that was built from one of the best former tag team professional wrestling managers. That's true wrestling territory, and a company that helped highlight future stars of the business. So it's time to sit back, relax, and let's take a trip down professional wrestling history. All right, to set the stage, it's 1991. WCW is getting more recognition, WWF is becoming more cartoonish, and the old territory system is on its last leg. Enter Jim Cornette. His idea for a company was simple: bring back traditional, southern, old school professional wrestling in a world that was changing. Why would Cornette do this, you will ask? He believed that there was still a fan base that wanted the hard-hitting action, emotion-filled promos, and good guys versus bad guys storytelling. The kind of wrestling that could pack armories, high school gyms, and community centers. And with help from the legendary music producer Rick Rubin, Cornette launched Smoky Mountain Wrestling with a very clear mission: wrestling the way it used to be and the way you like it. Now, the feel of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, it wasn't built on giant arenas and promos like we were seeing on TV then, or even seeing on TV now. It wasn't built on flashy lights or cartoon characters. It was built by local TV syndication, grassroots promotion, old-fashioned heat, and strong locker room culture. They toured at Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, and the Carolinas, places where wrestling wasn't just entertainment, it was tradition. Every week, fans would tune into Smoky Mountain Wrestling TV, expecting straight-ahead professional wrestling, simple but had powerful storytelling. The baby faces were people you could believe in. Heels were the kind of guys you don't want to meet in the streets. And stories connected because they felt real. Cornette wasn't trying to outdo the WWF. He just wanted to give wrestling fans an option that felt more honest and a lot more familiar. Now, one of the most fascinating parts about Smoky Mountain Wrestling is the talent that passed through the locker room. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was a launching pad for future legends. Let me break some down for you. Have you ever heard of Chris Jericho and Lance Storm? Yeah, back then they were called the Thrill Seekers. Before WCW, before ECW, before even WWE. Jericho and Storm were just two young Canadians trying to make a name in the States. Smoky Mountain Wrestling gave them their first quote-unquote big stage. And Jericho has went on record to say many times that in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, he learned the Southern psychology, how to slow down, how to talk to the crowd, and how to get an emotional reaction, which, let's be completely honest with it, he's pretty much a master at. Someone else that you might know, and he's actually still in Knoxville. Have you ever heard of Kane, a.k.a. Glenn Jacobs, or Mayor Jacobs? Yeah, he was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling as the Unabomb. This was even before he was Isaac Yakum, yeah, that terrible dentist character that WWF had him in. You're probably thinking, what the heck's the Unabomb? Well, think of pre-Kane. It's basically kind of sort of the same character, a monster in a mask, and he can pretty much beat the crap out of you. Yeah, that was the Unabomb. But Cornette seen real potential in Glenn Jacobs. He saw something in him that WWE would later agree with him, like, yeah, there's something in him, we're going to use him. We just got to look past fake Diesel, please. This is a tag team that a lot of people, especially the hardcore fans, such as myself, absolutely love. The Gangstas. New Jack and Mustafa. One of the most controversial acts in professional wrestling history. Their promos were explosives. Their heat was real. Their style was unapologetic and aggressive and, dare I say, at times, political. I mean, for crying out loud, on a promo that New Jack did, they had to put The views of the Gangsters do not reflect the views of Smoky Mountain Wrestling or any of associates with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. New Jack was just crazy. Let's just say that. Their run in Smoky Mountain Wrestling is what put them on ECW's radar, and they became legends in ECW. But in my opinion, they were legends before then. Now, here's a duo that a lot of people will 100% remember. Chris Candido and Tammy Sytch. Now, Tammy Sytch was just a manager / valet personality. She wasn't who we would know later in WWF. No, she was just a simple, well-dressed young lady who would do anything to get her man, Chris Candido, the win. And Chris Candido, I can talk forever about this guy. One of the most underrated talents in professional wrestling. And Smoky Mountain Wrestling is where he sharpened his work before going into the WWF, ECW, and WCW. Not only was Smoky Mountain Wrestling built on these rising stars, these future legends, they had veterans that held the promotion together. People like the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, they were the heart of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They were beloved everywhere they went, especially right here in Kentucky. And they gave the company legitimacy from day one. Another tag team we can mention, the Heavenly Bodies, Stan Lane and Dr. Tom Pritchard, and later on, Jimmy Del Rey, the perfect foils for the Rock and Roll Express, the yin and the yang. Their feud was classic Southern tag team wrestling, fast, emotional, and layered. Dirty White Boy, Tony Anthony. We'll talk about him next week, but just to trim it down a little bit, a blue-collared, believable babyface who connected with the audience because they felt like he was one of them. He was a good old boy. Cornette loved using working-class heroes, and Dirty White Boy was exactly that. The last and 100% certainly not least, Tracy Smothers. I can go on and on with Tracy Smothers stories that I have personally heard from the locker room. But Tracy Smothers is, again, one of the most underrated professional wrestlers of all time. You're starting to see a trend here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, if I may say so. His energy, his athleticism, his connection with the fans made him one of Smoky Mountain Wrestling's most important baby faces. Yes, that is another episode of the History of Pro Wrestling that will be coming out very, very soon. Might have some help from some friends. For storylines, Smoky Mountain Wrestling produced some of the most incredible storylines that people still study till this day. Like the Rock and Roll Express versus the Heavenly Bodies. This wasn't just a feud. This was the lifeblood of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It was everything classic tag wrestling should be. Heels cheating, baby faces rallying, fans emotionally invested, and matches that delivered every single time. The Gangsters with the real heat. Gangsters brought real world tension into the wrestling ring. I made mention earlier that their promos about race, policy, and privilege almost harmed Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where they had to put that disclaimer on. And not only that, the crowd reactions, some reacted a little too strongly because, for crying out loud, you were in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you're going to get some words I'm not ever going to repeat. And just that real heat, that real raw emotion that the Gangsters brought. And I'm not just talking about New Jack and Mustafa. I'm including D'Lo Brown as well. D'Lo was actually an original gangster. Not many people know that. Another story, and this one's a really important one, Ron Wright's redemption story. A legendary Tennessee heel brought back in a wheelchair, claiming he needed money for surgeries. He managed wrestlers to pay for those operations. Over the time, people began loving him. Might be one of the most emotional angles, not only in Smoky Mountain Wrestling history, but in professional wrestling history in general. Not many people know this, but in the mid-90s, Smoky Mountain Wrestling actually had a little bit of cross-promotion work going on. Not only with ECW, but with the WWF. it also helped that Jim Cornette was working with the WWF at this time. Think of it, it's not necessarily like NXT, like a developmental system. This would kind of sort of become what the developmental system will ended up being. They had a working relationship similar to what ECW had with WWF at the time. They swap talent in and out. If someone needed some work, they would go to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. If someone caught the eye of WWF, we'll use Glenn Jacobs as an example, they will put him up to WWF and have them work on TV. Same went for ECW, except ECW and Smoky Mountain was kind of, sort of, well, actually, ECW is just a little bit above from a national recognition. Above Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and they just cross-promoted quite a bit. Example, the Gangstas. That's the best example I can do. Al Snow, Chris Candido. Just a lot of those guys went to ECW and went to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But if you want my personal opinion, I know I'm an ECW fan. I like Smoky Mountain just a little bit better. But that's just me. Partnerships like this, especially with the WWF, help bring national recognition to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And to be completely honest with you, on a little personal side note, I think that's what kind of gets it its global cult following that it has today. Now, for people like me, growing up in Kentucky, absolutely, I knew about Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I was just, a little kid back then, but it's Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It's local. But to a national audience, especially back then when the internet was just starting and there was no streaming at all, it was kind of hard for promotions like Smoky Mountain Wrestling to get the recognition that they did. But with Smoky Mountain being so great, you're probably thinking, Joe, why the heck did it even close in the first place? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one, and we spoke about this earlier, the business was changing. Wrestling was becoming more national, more flashy, more extreme. The Attitude Era was coming, ECW was rising, and the old territory style was fading out. 2, financial struggle. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was not a huge company. Cornette once stated he would close it before the bills got too high to pay. And if you don't have the money, you can't keep a promotion running. Number 3, and this is something that I think kind of sort of still hurts local promotions, the region's economy. Towns in Appalachia wasn't thriving financially, making it tough to draw consistent crowds to keep the business afloat. Cornette, ever the realist that he is, chose to end the company with dignity, then let it collapse on its own. Even though Smoky Mountain Wrestling did close, it does leave behind a lasting legacy. It helped launch the careers of Jericho, Storm, New Jack, Al Snow, Candido, and Kane, just to name a few. Our true Southern wrestling style in a time where there was a major change happening within the industry. Its stories are still studied by wrestlers today. And it proved that smaller promotions, with the right passion and the right storytelling, could still mean something. Smoky Mountain Wrestling is remembered fondly because of its authenticity, of its emotion, of its raw and representation of professional wrestling. And it's a style of wrestling that will truly never, ever die. And that is the history, just a brief history, of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Now, there is a little pet project I'm working on. I would love to do a full-blown documentary on Smoky Mountain, but that's going to be kind of hard to do. So, maybe one day we'll get there. But that wraps up today's episode. I appreciate everybody that watched it. If you liked the video, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share it out to all the wrestling fans of the world. Speaking of all the wrestling fans in the world, if you truly love the sport of professional wrestling and you want to keep wrestling history alive, keep it up. Keep up the great work. However, if you're going to be a troll and you're just going to, comment stupid things just because you ain't got nothing better to do with your life, just shut up and enjoy professional wrestling. Until next time, folks, take care and goodbye.